Hi, everyone. Today, I'm going to be talking about, so I'm Geoff Anders. I'm a co-founder of the Quantum Bio Institute. I'm here with Clarice Aiello, the other co-founder of the Quantum Bio Institute. Today, we're going to be talking about tadpoles, quantum physics, and decentralized science. Let's start with tadpoles. So we took a whole bunch of tadpoles, in fact, about 3,000 of them, and we raised them inside a chamber. It was a specially designed box designed to block out the Earth's magnetic field, or block out magnetic fields in general. There's the tadpole in the chamber. We found that tadpoles raised inside the chamber developed more quickly than tadpoles that were raised outside. So we had a control. We raised some tadpoles in a similar box, similar temperature, humidity, lighting conditions. And we found that the ones raised inside the hypomagnetic chamber developed more quickly, and the ones that were raised in the control condition developed at a normal pace. And then just to be sure, we also did a batch or several batches, where we raised the tadpoles inside the chamber, but we recreated the magnetic field of the Earth to see what would happen. Result, when you take away the Earth's magnetic field, the result is that tadpoles develop more quickly than if they're simply subject to the magnetic field of the Earth. Okay. Why does this matter? Why does this have anything at all to do with quantum physics? Well, it so happens that the Earth's magnetic field is very, very weak. It's much orders of magnitude weaker than the produced by your cell phone. It's about 25,000 nanoteslas. Removing a magnetic field that is that weak isn't supposed to have an effect on the biology, but we found that it did. Okay, well, so then how do you explain this? There are 4 known explanations for how magnetic fields can have this sort of effect in biology. The first, some bacteria, in particular magnetotic bacteria, have tiny chunks of magnetite in them. So they respond to magnetic fields in the same way that as though it's a traditional compass. It's also the case that sharks and rays can respond to magnetic fields. Moving across a magnetic field creates an electrical current, which then they respond to. And then it's always possible that we're dealing with new physics. New physics is very unlikely. Maybe we encounter new physics. You're dealing with black holes, or dealing with things that are particularly surprising or uncommon. And then there's this 4th explanation. The 4th explanation has to do with the details of quantum mechanics. Now, you can probably guess where this is going. It's from the Quantum Biology Institute, but it so happens that weak magnetic field effects are found not just in tadpoles. They've been observed across the tree of life in cells of many different types. People have used magnetic fields to up and down regulate cells, cell function in many different ways. It so happens that when you look closely at the cells, you don't find small chunks of magnetite. The reason I give the example of magnetotactic bacteria is because that's the one where you do find small chunks of magnetite. Okay, well, if it's not small chunks of magnetite, what about conduction channels? Well, you find those sometimes also, like in sharks and rays, but you don't find them generally. And then new physics. It'd be great if we were stumbling across new physics. It doesn't seem very likely that we are. If we come across new physics, then we're onto something even bigger, but we think not that likely, which means there's only one remaining explanation that anybody has thought of, and that is that quantum physics is involved in some ways. Now, when people bring in quantum, frequently it's because they like mystery. Quantum seems cool, it's the unknown, maybe it explains everything, maybe we'll be able to explain consciousness. That would be cool. We're looking at quantum just because we have ruled out all of the other explanations. There's no other explanation makes sense, and so we're forced to go look here. How might this work? Well, I'm now going to talk to you just a little bit about quantum physics. This is, people are frequently told that quantum is too hard to understand and that this is the sort of thing you shouldn't even try to understand. I think that's broadly not the case. There's a bunch of mathematics involved, but at a conceptual level, what you have is the universe is exploring a whole bunch of different possibilities. If you happen to be familiar at all with quantum physics, you'll know about the two-slit experiment. You fire a particle through one or another of two slits. It does something really weird. You can think about this as though reality is exploring the possibility that it goes through one slit and the possibility that it goes through the other, and that those possibilities interfere with each other in a way that is precisely described by the wave function or Schrodinger's equation. That's essentially all you need to know for what we're going to talk about. We're not exactly sure what the mechanism's going to be, but this is a simple one that we hypothesize may be at work. The thing that normally happens is you have some electrons. Electrons have this special property called spin. Spin is a fundamental property like mass or like charge. Spin is up or down. The electrons sit there, they go into a superposition. This means they are exploring the possibility of being in the up state or the down state. The electrons then, in the superposition, well, the superposition collapses. Why? Well, there's maybe a nearby nucleus that interferes with it in the relevant way, and the result is you get a bunch of electrons with a particular distribution of up and down spins. Those then, in this particular example of a causal sequence, lead a protein to fold one way or another, which then leads to the production of, and this is again just an example, but it might, for instance, determine the amount of insulin that gets produced. And so you have a chemical reaction at the scale happening in biology, depending originally on something that's happening at the quantum level. In the example I just gave had the effect not in any sort of special way being influenced. There was a quantum mechanism involved. But so what happens if we interfere with it in a particular way? Electron spin superpositions respond to weak magnetic fields. Exactly the type of weak magnetic field that is affecting tadpoles, and that is affecting other types of organisms. The thing that can happen, and this has been shown to happen in chemistry, it is the same mechanism that's being used in quantum sensors. And so you think, why have the people not made the leap and figured out that that's happening in biology? I'm happy to talk to Clarice and myself. There's all sorts of interesting questions, or sort of going to talk about why they haven't made this leap. But essentially, the causal mechanism would be that you apply a weak magnetic field. This affects the electrons while they're in spin superposition, so that when it collapses, you get a different distribution of up and down spins. That then leads the protein to fold in a different way, which then ends up producing an effect at the biological level. In this case, you could imagine it producing more insulin, but weak magnetic fields have been used to up and down regulate all sorts of things happening in cells. They've been used to affect cell proliferation rates. This mechanism looks like it's happening all across biology. And I guess I should say now a little bit about why everyone hasn't jumped on this. The reason people haven't jumped on it is, I'll say the sort of simple and fun reason first, and then the technical reason. The simple and fun reason is that biologists don't like physics. They don't want to interact with math. Quantum physics sounds scary, and so biologists in general have stayed as far away from it as they could. We're currently in the process of hiring a physics-friendly biologist. If you happen to know one, please refer them. Turns out it's harder to find them than you'd think because biologists in general are scared of physics. And this doesn't mean that physicists come off particularly well. Physicists don't like squishy things. They just, and then biology is all full of squishy things. Physicists want to be thinking about like strings or like spatial manifolds. In general, the fact that quantum biology occurs between these two fields means that there can be a blind spot. The thing, and now on a technical level, the thing that people don't believe is they don't believe that something like a superposition can last for long enough inside a cell to be biologically relevant. They think that the cell, which is room temperature and which is chaotic, would collapse the superposition too quickly. It so happens, and this is where how Clarice managed to put all this together, her original training is as a chemist, and chemists use electron spin superpositions in sensing. This is how quantum sensing is done. There's a particular type of material, it's a diamond, but inside diamond there are these essentially holes called nitrogen vacancy centers. Electrons can exist in spin superposition longer in nitrogen vacancy centers at room temperature than people think. That's like a crystal lattice, so it's nice and stable, and unless the chemists are thinking about it, you have to make a further step. Could this actually be happening in a cell? That's the missing piece, and the fact is that there just are weak magnetic field effects all across biology, and there are no other known explanations. So then why don't we just make the inference? Well, the answer is that science proceeds by observation. And in order to do a direct observation of a quantum state, you actually have to build a fairly expensive quantum microscope. Nobody inside the existing legacy institutions wants to fork over the money in order to do that, and so you don't get direct observation. So there is this beautiful chain of reasoning that shows that this is the thing that's happening, and it can't get confirmed. Well, I mean, DeSci will come in a second. So I'm going to say a little bit about why this matters. I've mentioned weak magnetic field effects affecting things across the tree of life. The thing that we're talking about doing here is gaining a mechanistic understanding of how weak magnetic fields affect things. If you have that ability, you have the ability to deterministically affect a lot more of what's happening in biology than you would be able to otherwise. Now, we've been spending a whole bunch of time talking to people about quantum biology, and it turns out way more people are interested than at least we initially expected. We talked, so ARPA-H, for example, is starting to become interested. For people unfamiliar, that's the health version of DARPA. MIT Lincoln Lab, which is Department of Defense funded, did their own independent assessment of quantum biology and concluded that it's right on, and the thing that needs to happen is we need to build a quantum microscope to push the thing forward. We found that there are defense applications and people in defense who are interested. There are quantum computing applications. So right now when you try to build a quantum computer, you have to make everything very cold and control everything really, really well. If the quantum biology hypothesis is right, then nature has already figured out how to preserve different types of quantum states at room temperature for way longer than people think. And so there are lessons that could be learned in quantum computing by seeing how nature is doing something similar to what they're trying to do. And so we found people in government, philanthropists, VCs, and of course, people in the decentralized science community are interested, I should mention the connection to space. So if weak magnetic fields are actually having an effect in biology, you have to think about what's happening to astronauts as they go out into space and they're outside the Earth's magnetic field. We observed what we said, the tadpoles developed quicker. That's another way of saying accelerated aging. We know that astronauts experience a whole bunch of negative effects from being outside of the Earth's gravity. We've been in contact with people in NASA. They're a bit divided on this. They're starting to move in the right direction, but it seems quite plausible that some of the effects that astronauts experience are due to the absence of the Earth's magnetic field in addition to the effects of microgravity. So there's, and again, talk to myself or Clarice, there are applications everywhere because this looks like it is essentially, it's not exactly a fundamental force, but it's pretty close to it, and it's something that people aren't taking into account. The thing that is going to be the biggest application I mentioned, defense and quantum computing, also space. It has been surprisingly easy to get into contact with people in the relevant organizations. The thing that we've found, though, as the persistent use case, and the thing that we expect to by far be the most useful, is applications with respect to health and longevity. There are also applications in pharma. I mentioned weak magnetic fields controlling cellular division rates. That means that there's also biomanufacturing as an application. But imagine if people gained the ability, researchers and humanity in general, gained the ability to be able to up and down regulate many different functions of cells of many different types. Weak magnetic fields are cheap to produce. They're not invasive. We've been having great conversations with the people from bio about this and talk. You can imagine a future where you have clothing that has the ability to administer weak magnetic fields. You have a cell phone that has an app on it where you can dial up and down things. You could imagine this, you have a cut on your arm and you want to accelerate wound healing. You're having some other problem. You can imagine that as researchers figure out how to use magnetic fields better, that information gets transmitted. You get over-the-air updates to your phone, and so you're getting instant, faster, and better healthcare. There's an entire future that can be imagined here, and that's the thing that we're trying to unlock. Again, so you say, okay, well, if this is such an important thing and such a big effect, then why hasn't anyone stumbled across it? Well, the answer is some people have stumbled across it. There's Novacure as a company that produces a head covering that reduces the size of tumors using weak magnetic fields. Regenesis Bio reduces pain from diabetes using weak magnetic fields. But as far as we can tell, everyone has just stumbled on the strength of the magnetic field, the direction, the frequency. It's all by chance. They happen to come across it by chance. They don't understand what is the actual underlying formula. If you can work out what the underlying formula is, we've seen this in every science. You go from the very beginnings where people are mucking about and getting things to work to an understanding of what's actually happening in reality. This leads to precision engineering and the ability to do much, much greater things. That's what we're aiming to do. This is a complicated endeavor. As a result, we have come up with a novel institutional structure to enable the thing to happen, to get kicked off, and to become completely self-sufficient. We have 3 organizations. We have one organization, and we're working with bio, and they're helping us to get the second one up. Then a 3rd organization is planned. The first one, Quantum Bio Institute, is a nonprofit. It is there to do the basic research component that needs to happen at the beginning. We have our roadmap, which is right here, that covers all 3 of them. The line at the top is the roadmap for the Institute. You can see the first box is checked. That was verifying the reality of weak magnetic field effects in biology. We did this with the Tadpole experiment. Happy to talk more about that. The second organization is the DAO. There's need for a community and need for supporting research. There are a whole bunch of things that are useful that can be done. I mean, Clarice spent a while trying to fight her way forward in academia. Academia generally wasn't interested. This is despite her being able to win grants, despite the science being, as far as we can tell, like completely solid. It's just not something that people were interested in. Maybe it's because the biologists don't like math and the physicists don't like squishy things. Whatever the reason, it was very, very hard to make progress. There are also things that, and I guess I'll talk about this in a second. So let me just mention the third organization. The third organization is an incubator. We expect that this is not just going to be a new field, this is going to be an entire industry. Getting the field up and running and getting the industry up and running seem to work best hand in hand. When we talked to VCs, they wanted to know if government was in. Government wanted to know if VCs were in, not officially, but unofficially, and everybody's looking at everybody else to see whether the thing is real. So we got everyone to see that everyone was looking at everyone else and that the thing was real. This helped to get a lot of gears turning. But we have gotten VC interest. The simplest applications are going to be just commercializing treatments that come from the control of weak magnetic fields. But what we're planning to do is to have all of these organizations work together. In particular, we're planning to have the Institute and the DAO own part of the incubator, so absolutely every company that exits feeds money back into the DAO and back into the Institute, making it so that as soon as we start exiting companies, the field will become self-sufficient and can continue doing basic research while at the same time pursuing useful applications. We think that decentralized science is great for this. People are much more open-minded. The stories that you'll hear about how academia is dysfunctional, these are true. There are some good things in academia still. It's hard to find anything that's, there are still pieces, but as a whole, it seems like this is the sort of thing that should be supported in a decentralized way, and science is supposed to be decentralized. Like, science is supposed to be open. Part of the reason that, so for the Institute, we are releasing all of the IP generated by the nonprofit into the public domain. This is in order to create a foundation of knowledge that will make it possible for everyone else to come in so that an industry comes about. That's the openness part, but there's a way in which saying open science is sort of redundant. Science was always originally open. That's part of the point. The same thing is true of decentralized science. And so we think there's a perfect match. And so we're part of Bio's second cohort. We're really excited to be here. And again, please come talk to myself or Clarice if you want to learn more about the quantum bio revolution.